Hello and welcome to Non-Toxic Nerd, home of movies, TV, comics, and games. Today we're looking at episode 3 of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Power Broker. As always, this video will be spoiler heavy, so if you haven't already, go watch it and come back. If you've already seen it or you just don't care, then let's get started. We open with a Global Repatriation Council commercial. It's very friendly and upbeat tones, basically saying they're here to help, they want to help everyone get back to normal. It's very contrasting to the next scene where we see militarized GRC agents and John Walker raiding the safe house that we saw Carly and the Flag Smashers in last episode. The host pretends not to know English, so Battlestar translates to German, says he doesn't know who Carly is or what they're talking about with regard to the Flag Smashers. The host then spits in Walker's face, and we start to see a more unhinged side of John Walker. He shoves the host up against the wall, shouts, "Do you know who I am?" in his face. The host says he does and doesn't care. So we start seeing Walker reacting to getting disrespected for not being the real Captain America. A conversation with Battlestar afterwards shows that they have no further leads, and it's really hard to get people the Flag Smashers have helped to turn on them. So Walker says it's time to bet on somebody with a better hand. So it looks like they're going to go find somebody with a little more information than they have. We then cut to Sam and Bucky doing exactly that in a German prison, going to see Zemo. As soon as Bucky walks into the cell, Zemo tries using the code words on Bucky. Obviously they don't work, confirming Bucky really is no longer the Winter Soldier. But Zemo believes there still is a little Winter Soldier in there, deep down somewhere. He does seem genuinely surprised to hear the Super Soldier Serum was recreated, and we all know how much Zemo hates Super Soldiers, so he seems to be on board right away. He does confirm that he knows where to start looking, and Bucky goes back to Sam and says that he wants to break him out of the prison, to which Sam is vehemently opposed. We then get a scene where Bucky explains to Sam how to hypothetically break Zemo out, while intercutting with the actual breakout, which includes starting a prison fight, Zemo incapacitating a guard and stealing his uniform and card key. He's blending in with the other guards, making his way out through a series of doors. At the end of Bucky's explanation of how this would hypothetically happen, Zemo enters the garage where they're waiting for him, and Sam freaks out, but he is eventually swayed by Bucky. He brings up how when Steve Rogers opposed the Sokovia Accords, Sam sided with Steve and helped him to whatever end. And they're just trying to stop the super soldiers, and they need Zemo to do that. So Sam eventually comes around, and we cut to the title card. We come back to the trio, and they're getting supplies from Zemo's garage. It's not really made clear if it's the same one or a different one. It most likely is the same one. That doesn't really matter. We also see him grab the purple mask from the promotional material and ultimately from the comics. So more on that later. And Zemo says that they're going to go find some of his former criminal contacts, starting with Selby. So in the comics, Selby is a mutant and a member of the Mutant Liberation Front, and he has the power to interact with computer and machine language. So it seems at first that they're starting to open the door a little bit for mutants in the MCU, but we'll see later how they treat Selby, the character of Selby. In the comics, he's a very minor character. I think he only appears in 1 or 2 issues. So they can be pretty loose about how they use this character. We then see the trio boarding Zemo's private jet, and we are reminded that he is in fact a Baron, and his family was royalty in Sokovia before it was destroyed by the Avengers. On the plane, Zemo has Bucky's list somehow, which we haven't seen since the first episode, and we get to see some more names. So some of the names I saw were, of course, Y Nakajima, which of course is Yori from the first episode. There's an A Claremont Windsor, which is probably a reference to Chris Claremont, who helped lay the groundwork for a lot of the current modern X-Men history. There's actually a lot of references to Claremont work in this episode. And then Barry Windsor Smith was a British illustrator who did a lot of work for Wolverine and some iconic Weapon X art on that story arc. There's also an S. Whitaker, most likely a reference to Steve Whitaker, a British Marvel colorist who worked across several titles under the Marvel banner. There's an L. Hudson, which is possibly a reference, maybe Elizabeth Hudson. Of course, Liz is short for Elizabeth. That would be Wolverine's mom from his the Wolverine Origins comic. There's an L. Atwood, which that name is crossed out, so most likely referring to the senator from the first episode. So of course Bucky gets pretty defensive and takes the notebook back. Zemo surmises the names are people Bucky is trying to make amends with from his Winter Soldier days. Sam also recognizes the notebook as Steve's from back in Civil War, and we have a callback to Steve's list of pop culture references to get him caught up with society. Sam mentions he told Steve about Trouble Man, Marvin Gaye's Trouble Man, and a conversation ensues about how great Marvin Gaye and Trouble Man is. Bucky's still a fan of 40s music, so he's not really hot on it, and both Zemo and Sam are kind of incredulous. They're great, they're awesome, and it's just kind of a funny. It's nice to see. It's nice to see Zemo partake in a little bit of levity that has no sinister undertones to it. Kind of makes him more of a human, and that again, like a lot of these villains in the Marvel universe, he's probably a really good guy, and he really thinks what he's doing is right, and the actions he took were the right actions to take. But there's lines you cross, there's certain lines you shouldn't cross, which make you a bad guy. Zemo then monologues about the dangers of putting people like Steve on a pedestal. He refers to Hitler being put on a pedestal by his followers and wanting to stop more Red Skulls from taking power in the world, and that's why he's helping him track down and stop these super soldiers. He then says they're going. He tells the guys where they're going, which is a huge Marvel Comics reference. They're going to Madripoor. So Sam says that Zemo talks about it like it's Skull Island from King Kong lore, which is kind of a weird phrase. Like, what does he mean by that? Does he mean that it sounds ominous, or that he should know what he's talking about? It's just weird that this line was included, especially in an episode that aired just days after Godzilla vs. Kong, especially when this is probably filmed a long time ago, so they wouldn't have known. I don't think they would have known that it would be released just days after the Godzilla v. Kong movie, which I've watched, by the way. We might do a video on it. It's just time to get all this stuff recorded at this point. So more on Madripoor. This is a huge location in the comics, especially for the X-Men. It's an Indonesian country neighboring Singapore. It first appeared in a Chris Claremont New Mutants run in 1985. It's a hotbed of criminal activity and is divided into High Town, where the rich live, and Low Town, where the poor live. Madripoor does not allow extradition, making it a safe haven for fugitives, and the island country is visited often by probably the most famous mutant in our real world, which is Wolverine, and it was the focal point most recently in 2011 of an alien invasion, which was staved off by the X-Men in another Claremont run, Extreme X-Men. So possibly we had the Selby reference earlier. This looks like it's widening the door a little bit more to mutants in the MCU. Bucky also mentions that it was a pirate sanctuary in the 1800s, which is where it started being a kind of a safe haven for criminals. Zemo tells Bucky that he has to pretend to be the Winter Soldier to get in. Most likely this will just grant easier access for them, since Winter Soldier still is the most famous assassin in the Marvel underworld. We then cut to the Flag Smashers at their new haven. Carly is called to the bedside of a woman. I'm not sure if at this point she's dead or just close, but Carly is teary-eyed. She says she's sorry, and we will find out who this woman is later this episode. We then cut back to a waterfront camera approach to Madripoor. It's a pretty cool looking city, lots of tall buildings, neon. We see the trio walking down a bridge to Madripoor. Zemo has his trench coat on from the promotional material. Bucky is dressed somewhat like the Winter Soldier. He's got a brown leather jacket instead of a black one, and of course, shorter hair. Sam complains that he's dressed like a pimp, to which Zemo replies, leave it to an American to assume a fashion-forward black man looks like a pimp. Basically, he's wearing a suit with kind of traditional African patterns. But he is disguised as Conrad Mack, also known as the Smiling Tiger, who we see a picture and he bears a resemblance to. I'm sure it's just Anthony Mackie, also dressed up with a beard. But the point is, he's supposed to look like this guy. That's why he's dressed up as him. And this isn't some name they just made up. This is actually another reference to the comics. Conrad Mack is the son of a Vietnam vet who, along with his army unit, discovers a cult in the jungle called the Dragon's Breath. The cult has a plan to breed a super soldier race, and part of that plan is to use the soldiers to this end. So Conrad's father goes along with this and falls in love and marries one of the brides that the cult has provided. Conrad is born. He's born with. They have this well that grants them powers, and Conrad is born with claws. He's trained by his father in combat and jungle tactics. It's kind of a long, drawn-out story, but he eventually joins a group called the Folding Circle, which is a team of other children from the cult, and he takes the name Smiling Tiger. The team steals a Quinjet during a battle with the New Warriors, and they crash in Madripoor, where they become major players in organized crime. So that's kind of the backstory. So even in this show, we find out later Smiling Tiger is a known person in Madripoor. And it's also mentioned that Madripoor smells like acid. This is actually also referenced in the comics. It's got a very distinctive kind of acid, death kind of smell to it. So the trio is heading to Lowtown to meet one of Zemo's contacts, which is kind of interesting considering how rich Zemo is. You'd think he actually had a contact in Hightown. But anyways, we're heading to Lowtown. They jump in a car and head across the bridge. It's a cool neon setting. There's guards carrying automatic rifles. There's money being exchanged. They really push the underworld setting really well. Zemo speaks to Bucky in Russian to keep cover, so basically kind of showing that he has the Winter Soldier under control, which helps them avoid probably a lot of trouble on their way in. They go to a bar. The bartender recognizes Sam as Smiling Tiger and asks if he wants the usual, which turns out to be a drink with raw rattlesnake meat in it. Sam reluctantly drinks it to keep cover. A guy approaches Zemo, tells him he's not welcome. Apparently he works for the power broker, and Bucky seems to know what they're talking about, but he refers to it as a power broker, implying there's probably more than one guy handing out superpowers. I'm assuming that's what the power broker does. And Zemo replies that every kingdom needs its king, and he really wants to stay under their radar. The power broker in this area is the judge, jury, and executioner, so they really don't want to be messing with him or her, whoever the power broker is. Another guy starts to approach the trio, and Zemo tells Winter Soldier to attack in Russian. A little brawl breaks out with a lot of these lowlives attacking Bucky. It kind of seems like Zemo planned this because he even kind of shoulder shoves a guy at Bucky. The fight ends when Bucky's kicked a lot of butt, and we hear a lot of guns audibly cock and are ready to go. Zemo whispers to Bucky to stay in character. Right after this, the trio is told that Selby is ready to see them, and we meet Selby, who is actually not at all like the comics. Like I said earlier, he's a mutant with the power to communicate with computers and machines. He's kind of a large black man. This Selby is played by Imelda Corcoran, which is apparently a pretty notable Australian actor. She also made appearances in early Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. episodes. And we don't get any indication that she has any kind of mutant powers. So, like I said, very minor character in the comics. They can do basically whatever they want with this character, so they decided to go in a different direction. Selby mentions that she heard Zemo was in a German prison before commenting that Sam is taller than she had heard Smiling Tiger is. So far everybody has recognized Sam as Smiling Tiger, maybe just a few things off here and there, maybe getting a little suspicious. So Zemo offers Bucky as the Winter Soldier in return for info on the Super Soldier Serum, and she says that it's in town and mentions a Dr. Wilfred Nagel. Now, this is guy's actually from the comics. He's actually one of the original scientists on Project Rebirth, which created Captain America. And after the lead scientist on that project was killed, he was tasked with recreating the serum, which led to the tests on the black men, which is how Isaiah Bradley became Captain America. So we're kind of starting to connect some things together. This will be alluded to later on when we actually meet Nagel. And before they can get any more information out of Selby, Sam's phone starts ringing. Things get really tense as Selby tells him to answer it and put it on speaker. It turns out that it's actually Sarah, Sam's sister from the first episode. She's calling to talk about the boat and the bank situation. They're able to play this off pretty well, considering Sarah doesn't know the situation that Sam is in until she refers to him as by his name as Sam. So Selby catches on, orders her guards to kill the trio, but right away she's taken down by a sniper bullet through the window. We don't see the shooter, but we see it come through and she goes down. So a fight breaks out. The trio they get out. They're escaping down the street, and we hear everybody on the street. All their phones are going off. They with messages saying that Selby is dead and there's a Bitcoin bounty offered for her killer's execution. So they start running. They're chased by guys on motorcycles, and they're taken down by a couple of shots from the dark. We see the shooter emerge, revealing Sharon Carter, Agent 13, reprised by Emily Van Camp, who we haven't actually seen since Civil War. They clue her in on what's going on and why they're there. She says kind of why she's in Madripoor. Basically, she's been on the run since helping Captain America in Civil War. So she takes them to her place in Hightown. It turns out since she's been on the run, she decided to join in on the Underworld Fund and seems to be selling stolen artwork and artifacts. So back at Sharon's place, there's some banter back and forth. Eventually, Sam makes a deal to clear Sharon's name in return for her help with finding Nagel. She says she's having clients over and tells the trio to stay out of trouble. And we cut to a party in her house. I'm not a huge fan of club scenes in movies and TV. I just think they look hokey. This one isn't very different, except we do get to see Zemo dancing for a second, or have to see Zemo dancing depending on how you see it. It's I don't know if it was supposed to be funny, but it's kind of funny. Sharon then finds the guys and says she's located Nagel. They head out to a shipping yard and find an empty container. A short investigation in the container reveals a secret door which opens up to a lab where we find Dr. Wilfred Nagel working on what appears to be a serum of some kind. So I don't know if he's reproducing more. It's possible considering the context of his conversation with the guys later on in just a second. They don't get a lot of time to talk before a bunch of bounty hunters show up. We get to see Sharon's fighting skills as she takes down multiple bounties and actually takes some hits herself. Very proficient as a fighter. It looks like, she was already an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. Looks like she's honed her skills even more since then. So the conversation with Nagel reveals that he was working for Hydra on the Winter Soldier project, and after Hydra fell, the CIA recruited him. He continued the super soldier work and found a formula that worked. He mentioned an American test subject using their blood to create more serums. Most likely this is Isaiah Bradley's blood that was used. He also reveals that he was dusted in the blip, and after he returned, of course it was 5 years later, all his, everything was all mixed up, so he went and started working for the power broker. He reveals that he made 20 samples, which were all stolen by Carly and the Flag Smashers. So maybe he was in there trying to make more. But that tells us who was it the first episode? No, the second episode, Carly receives a text message saying she stole something and someone's after her. It's most likely the power broker, as she stole those serum samples from Nagel. We see Zemo run his hand under a counter and comes up with a handgun. Nagel reveals that he has no serum with him at the moment when Sharon bursts in after kicking some more mercenary butt, saying they have run out of time, they need to leave. Zemo shoots Nagel, and everyone tackles him down, and an RPG is launched into the lab. Zemo escapes, Buck, Sam, and Sharon also get out before the whole lab blows up. Then a gunfight ensues between Bucky, Sam, Sharon, and all these bounty hunters coming after them. Um, Zemo comes up from behind them. He's wearing his purple mask, so classic Zemo. He comes up from behind the baddies, blows up a gas line. He jumps down, uh, takes a few more out, and then allow our other three heroes who are trapped to escape. He then goes and finds a car in one of the kind of a classic looking car in one of the containers and drives around to pick up Bucky and Sam. This is where they part ways with Sharon and they drive off, but it's kind of a funny scene. We get to see it's kind of a callback to Civil War, where Bucky refuses to move his seat to give Sam more leg room, and that happens again. He's still not moving that seat. Sharon walks off around a corner, um, right into a car, and she says that they have a couple of problems. So it looks like she's working for somebody, potentially the power broker, maybe somebody else. It's not made clear for the rest of this episode, so we'll have to tune in next week to see. We then cut to a GRC supply depot in Vilnius, Lithuania. Carly is outside with another flag smasher scouting the building. They have a conversation about if they thought they'd ever be doing what they're doing. Her friend brings up being mom security in Madripoor. Carly mentions that she wanted to be a teacher. So it sounds like they, at least Carly and some other friends of hers, had kind of made something of a life for themselves during the blip, the 5 years, and when everyone blipped back, they were thrown out on the streets. And she found her way to Madripoor because she knew there was something there that she could use to protect her and her friends. So I'm not sure if she knew about the serum being there or if she was just banking on the fact that something would work out. She mentions how scared she was taking the serum, like her veins were on fire and she wanted to die, but in the end it was all worth it because they're able to take the world back for themselves and help the kids in the refugee camps that they're helping. Again, this just shows that she really believes what she's doing is right. She mentions Mama Danya a couple times. I couldn't find anything on Mama Danya, but it seems that she might be the mother figure for the Flag Smashers. Maybe the lady that was in the hospital bed earlier. Her friend she's with says that the power broker is going to come after them, and Carly, reveals that Nagel was killed and claims to have the last of his serum, just like Nagel also said. So she doesn't seem afraid of the power broker anymore. She seems to think she has leverage over him, or her, whoever the power broker is. And then we cut to Walker and Battlestar. They're at the German prison where Zemo was held, and they find out that Sam and Bucky got there first. They have a little conversation, and it sounds like they're going off book. They're not going to be doing any government missions finding Buck and Sam. They're going to do it their way. So starting to see an even more unhinged side of John Walker. We then cut to Sam, Bucky, and Zemo on Zemo's private jet. Sam is on the phone with Torres. He wants him to look into Danya Badani. Says she's a refugee, and most likely it's that. We're pretty sure at this point, or I was anyways, that Mama Danya Madani, that's the woman who was in the hospital bed earlier in the episode. Sam sits down, says he feels guilty about Sharon's whole ordeal being on the run, and is still understandably torn up about Isaiah just being mentioned as some American test subject by Nagel. He starts wondering if all the people hurt for the shield, which he calls a hunk of metal, was worth it. Bucky defends this, saying that hunk of metal saved a lot of lives, but Sam doesn't seem real impressed. Says he should have destroyed the shield instead of giving it to a museum. Bucky says it still means something to a lot of people, and he's going to try to take it is before Sam destroys it, implying that he maybe will take a swing at being the new Captain America. Sam gets a call back saying that Darnie was found dead in Riga, which is a city near the Baltic Sea. And then Zemo, so it looks like that's where they're heading. Zemo mentions that he has a place they can go in Riga, and he's looking forward to a face-to-face with Carly. We then cut to the Flag Smashers raiding the supply depot. Carly mentions that they had 6 months of food, or 6 months of supplies stored up in the depot that was just sitting. Carly gets into the car with her Flag Smasher friend from earlier, commands him to put his seatbelt on before a firebomb goes off in the building. He says that there were still people in there, and she says that violence is the only language they understand. So we're starting to see, yes, she believes she's the good guy. Yes, she does really believe in her cause, but there are lines she's willing to cross, which includes killing people to get her message across. So maybe not as good as she thinks she is. We then cut to Riga, Latvia, not Latveria, which is how I read it on the screen at first, and almost lost my mind because, of course, Latveria is the country that Doctor Doom is he kind of lords over. But it's not that, it's Latvia. That's a real country in the real world, so I had to rewind it, take another look. No Fantastic Four references yet. Zemo reveals, while they're walking in Riga, that the land that was once Sokovia was eaten up by neighboring countries. He's still very bitter about all of that, understandably. Bucky says he needs to take a walk, and he splits off. He starts finding some very familiar looking metal beads, seem to be leaving a trail. He walks into an alley to be met by Ao of the Wakanda Special Forces, reprised, of course, by Florence Kasumba. So that's where we end the episode. Looks like Wakanda has got some unfinished business with Zemo. So we're halfway through, and we still have characters showing up that seem to have bigger roles. We're starting to see the not so cool side of John Walker. We also get to hear the Zemo theme from Civil War throughout this episode. And we have a lot of questions that need answers still. So who is the power broker? We learned a little bit more, but still no reveal despite the title of the episode. What is Sharon Carter up to? Who is she working for? Will Walker and Hoskins catch up to Bucky and Sam? How far will the Flag Smashers go to achieve their goals? And is Ao working on behalf of Wakanda, or is she out for revenge? So another strong episode that continues to expand the MCU and showcases the variety that it can pull off. We had an espionage theme this episode. Last week was action. The first one was a lot of backstory. And just like the previous two, this episode has me really excited to see what happens next. So that does it for today's video. Like I said, I'm really excited for episode 4. Tune in next week for the episode 4 breakdown. Please like, share, and subscribe. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all as Non-Toxic Nerd. And special thanks again to Brad for our music. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.